So, I was listening to the radio a few weeks back, and they were discussing which 3 friends you would want with you if there was a zombie attack and you were in charge of saving the world. So, like you do, lying in bed the other day, I posed this question to my husband. And between us, we decided on 3 people. We would have our ex-Marine friend, who is hard as nails. He's a born survivor, and he's definitely someone we want on the team. And we'd have another friend who is a nuclear physicist, because he would surely come in handy. And we would also have a funny ukulele-playing doctor for laughs and to make us better. All of them are incredibly wise, incredibly intelligent, and each have unique talents. I'm convinced between them they could rally the troops, take on the enemy, and win the battle. But me, on the other hand, I'm fairly sure I would not be picked for anybody's zombie attack team. I have no qualifications, I'm athletically challenged, and there are so many others that could do a better job than me. The passage we're looking at today, Jesus selects 3 friends, very ordinary people who are going to experience one of the most extraordinary moments in history. But first, we need to rewind right back to the beginning of time, when God creates humans. In the Old Testament, God begins by creating the world and creating people that he wants to be in relationship with. But very quickly, it goes downhill, and humanity forfeits God's blessing through sin and rebellion. God continually tries to restore the blessing, but humans keep letting him down. So in order for his presence to be with his people, God gets a guy named Moses, who is imperfect and shouldn't be in the position that he is, but God chooses him. He gets him to climb a mountain, and he's given a set of laws and instructions that the people must obey to be in God's presence. Now, God is a little bit like the sun. His holiness is like the sun. Imagine the sun, which gives life and warmth, but is unimaginably hot and powerful. If you get too close to it, you're going to die. It's the same for God's presence. The people were unable to enter the presence of God if they were unclean in any way. So these laws and rituals were given to Moses to help the people to become pure so they could enter the presence of God. Now the people kept rebelling and kept sinning and kept disappointing God and being unable to be in his presence. So God then sent prophets, and the prophets were the people who spoke words directly from God. And God sent a man named Elijah. He went from place to place, challenging rulers and individuals to follow their God and obey his commands. God had spoken many times in the past through prophets, but Elijah was special and probably the most significant prophet in the Old Testament. So years go by and this cycle continues, and people keep disappointing God and sinning and rebelling against him. And then Jesus comes. And he's born into a time of Roman rule, and Jewish people are desperate for the Messiah that had been prophesied to come and to fix everything. Now, they expected a king who would end up on the throne, overthrowing the Romans. He would be strong, and he would be mighty, and he would be a warrior. They were strictly trying to follow the laws that God had given them and detailed to Moses, and they were pretty exhausted at the time. And Jesus starts his public ministry, and we begin to understand that he's not the king the Jews expected. In Luke 4, Jesus reads one of the prophecies that was actually spoken over him centuries before. And he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery for sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Instead of fighting the Romans and overthrowing the throne, as the Jews expected their new messianic king to do, this man is laying out his mission statement that he's all about the poor. He's all about the disabled. He's all about the criminals and the least of the least. This is astonishing. In the place where these types of people were outcasts, Jesus is bringing a new, unexpected, upside-down kingdom where there's a reversal of the value systems. The agenda is radical generosity, servant leadership, peacemaking, forgiveness, and a new people who are deeply pious but reject religious hypocrisy. Jesus is as holy as God was when people couldn't enter his presence without being pure. But instead of humans having to become clean and spotless to enter God's presence, God's presence comes through Jesus. And as Jesus touches the people, they become clean and they become pure and they become enveloped in his presence. This is huge stuff. So his ministry continues and he gathers 12 men to join him and he goes around teaching with absolute authority. He does miracles for the people that society rejects. And it shows that this is the new kingdom that's ruled by love. But the Romans are becoming increasingly concerned that this guy is bringing attention. And the Jewish teachers of the law don't believe he's the Son of God, but yet his following grows, and it grows, and it grows, and people start recognizing him as God. As Jesus' followers increase in number, he chooses to retreat to the mountain, and he takes with him 3 of his closest companions. Now, like my zombie attack team, if I were in charge and I was Jesus, I would choose a team of intelligent, wise, gifted people with spotless reputations. These men, after all, are about to see the glory of God. And what they see, they're going to share. And this message is going to change the world forever. But Jesus, in line with the ministry that he started and the message that he's speaking, chooses a different type of people. He chooses Peter, James, and John, 3 fishermen. At the time, fishermen were likely to be uneducated, potty-mouthed, hot-tempered. James and John were nicknamed sons of thunder by Jesus, which gives us an indication of their temperament. They were sinful men who didn't always apply the gospel lessons that they'd learned under Jesus to their earthly matters. They were an unlikely choice, but these men were deeply loyal and deeply loved, and they deeply loved the Son of God. So we're going to read what happens next in Luke 9:28-36. The Transfiguration. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him up the mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and 2 men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at the time what they had seen. So this, the Transfiguration, is an incredibly pinnacle moment in history. So the word transfigured comes from the Greek word metamorpho, and it means to change into another form. In the case of the Transfiguration of Jesus, it means to match the outside with the reality of the inside. So Jesus looked like any other human, but the Transfiguration was a glimpse of the true, unimaginable God glory within him. Not only is Jesus being momentarily transfigured, but with him are 2 men who had not been on earth for hundreds of years. Moses, who gave the law to God's people, and Elijah, who foretold the life of Jesus and the coming of a new kingdom through him. Their presence with Jesus at that time acknowledges that this glorious man, who they know will soon be crucified and raised to life for the sins of the world, is who he says he is. And God says, "This is my son." Jesus has fulfilled the Old Testament law, and Moses is there to verify it. He has fulfilled Old Testament prophecy, and Elijah is there to verify it. And he is the Son of God, and God is there to verify it. Now, who should witness this all? So in Jewish law, for something to be witnessed and to be a proper thing, 3 people have to be there. And 3 people are there in the spiritual realm. You've got Moses, Jesus, and Elijah. But 3 people are also there in the earthly realm. You've got Peter, John, and James. These ordinary people, imperfect, potty-mouthed, bad-tempered, loose cannon type men. And even during the transfiguration, they get it wrong. Peter wants to create 3 shelters so this moment can last, and Jesus, Moses, and Elijah can stay in their shelters. But in a moment, it's all over. Jesus leads them down the mountain, and before long, he is crucified and resurrected. These 3 ordinary men are integral in spreading the good news of Jesus Christ. They have witnessed his goodness and his glory, and their message that they shared is as relevant today as it was then. The power at work in Jesus at the Transfiguration is the same power that raised him from the dead, and is the same power that chooses the unlikeliest of people, and is the same power that lives in us today. He wants to use us. He wants to use me, an ordinary person, to know him, to deeply love him, to be deeply loved by him, and to enjoy him, just as he did Peter, James, and John. God's master plan to save the world is through ordinary people. We are his master plan. We are his inner circle, and we are deeply, deeply loved by him.